And I wanted to take this opportunity today to go through some new tools in Studio, as well as some tools that have been there for a while, but I think quite a few people may tend to overlook or simply have just never experimented with and don't really know what they do. So we're going to go through kind of a multitude of things, from some new filtering tools and techniques that have been added, and some different things that have been changed with the translate and rotate, as well as some new options as far as digitizing, creating CAD objects, and some triangulation tools, and some new ways of reporting on the data that you've collected. So let's go ahead and jump into Studio. So we're going to start things off with, let me make sure I've got my correct scan here. We're going to start some things off with a new filter that's been added. So for our North American clients, this is possibly getting into the season where this is going to be a common sight. So this is a typical scan in a snowstorm. So the laser is reflected off of the snow that is falling around, and for a kind of a certain range around the scanner, it's actually dense enough to pick up points. And for the longest time, this has kind of been a really arduous manual process to delete these unwanted points and just get down to the actual data that you were seeking before creating a triangulation. And we've done this through a multitude of ways, but with working with R&D, they've been able to create a filter for us that basically makes it a one-click process. So we now have a filter that's actually just labeled dust and snow. And really, it's just a combination of, we're kind of combining two filters in one here. So we've always had the option to filter points by intensity, and we've always had the option to filter points by range, and now we're just doing both at the same time. So what this filter does is it's getting rid of all the points that don't exceed a specific intensity that you can edit, and only applying that to points within a certain range from the scanner. And this does a couple things. Basically, the reason the scanner picks up snow points and dust points is they're really small particles. So when it does pick them up, it's not getting a really strong, a really intense return reading from that laser. So you can see I've actually got these scan colored by intensity. The snow is almost all blue. So when I apply this, you can see just with that one click, that one filter, we got rid of almost everything. And now, you know, those thousands of points are out of the way. But we're not out of the woods yet. So if I put this horizontally, and I'm going to use the plus button on my keyboard to increase the pixel size just so everyone can see what I'm talking about here. There's still some points that it didn't get. Now, obviously, we went from thousands down to, you know, a handful, maybe 20 or 30. And it's really easy to rely pretty heavily on the despike option with the triangulation, and in this case it might get rid of all of these, it might not. But in some circumstances you're just better off just doing a little bit more cleaning up on the data prior to creating the triangulation. So another filter that I think a lot of people tend to forget, or maybe just don't really know what it does, is this isolated points filter. And this is a perfect situation for it. So the way the filter works is basically it's going to get rid of every point that is farther than whatever distance I choose, in this case 5 feet, from the adjacent point. So basically there's nothing around that point for 5 feet, and the software kind of interprets that to mean that it's not on an object, that there's probably, you know, not just a one-point object out there floating around by itself. So this can, just like all of our filters, you can change the number. Now 5 feet works pretty good for me. And in this circumstance, you can see obviously now we're down to just the actual bare ground that we wanted and the equipment that is in the area. So with just applying those two filters, we've basically taken what used to be, for many users, a long, arduous process and kind of clipped it down to just 2 simple clicks. So I've got another example to show you as far as the utilizing the snow filter. So when I talk about the old way of doing things, that obviously means different things to different people depending on what you're comfortable with and the tools you like to use. So I'm just real quickly going to go ahead and apply that same filter in this instance to get rid of those points. And the reason I'm doing that So this is actually, let me explain this a little bit better. This is an area where, say we were interested in these power lines. Obviously the snow actually goes right in between them. So it could be really hard to make sure we delete out all the snow points, but we retain the power lines if, say, we wanted to actually measure a height for clearance from that area. Whereas utilizing the snow and dust filter, it gets rid of all of those, but you see it doesn't actually take away from the resolution from those power lines at all. Now, on the flip side, say we were actually interested in keeping these power lines, like I said, getting rid of these power lines, but we wanted to keep all the points around it. If I, look at it this direction, obviously I don't want to delete everything that's in that pond behind us, but I want to be able to select these power lines in and of themselves. So there's a really, really powerful tool. It's the section viewing tool. So it's got these blue and red stripes through it, and it's on the top of your section window. So this is the toolbar that only pops up when you have something in the viewer. So I'll just minimize this real quick so you guys can see this toolbar right here along the top. So I'm going to go ahead and open this back up and grab this section viewing tool here. And the way this works is it basically limits your view of the object in the screen to a specific width. And I'm going to pick my 2 points, and I'm going to pick them along this power line, and I'll show you what that looks like. So it's automatically going to put it in a horizontal aspect for me. And now, basically, I'm just looking at all the point cloud data, but I'm only looking at 406 feet of it. And I'm looking just along the axis where I actually designated those points. And I can limit this down to whatever I want, 100 feet. And we've got this option to do a section offset and then also a section step distance. So if I make that step distance something really small, like 10 feet, I can actually click up or down, and then we'll actually move through the scan so you can get really precise with what you're looking at. So this gives us the ability to come in here, and then we can select really simply using the Polygon select option. We can select what we're not interested in and delete it, and now we're not worried about accidentally selecting points that are in the foreground or the background that we want to keep before creating our model. So and this can really easily, just by hitting this red clear button to the right-hand side of the toolbar, by hitting that, brings all of the data back into view, and then it gives us the option if we want to go ahead and select a different orientation to view it in a section again. So this is a really powerful option. A lot of people are aware of it, but there's a lot of people that aren't or just haven't used it in the past. So that's something to keep in your back pocket. It can be really helpful depending on the data set you're working with. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up another data set here. So these scans that we're about to look at, let me bring these in the view so you guys can see what we're talking about here. What I've got is I have 4 separate scans, and they're all of the same area, or supposed to be. And they're colored differently, so you could pretty easily identify that yellowish gold one up to the left not sitting where it needs to be, and I didn't have GPS coordinates for that scan. And in the past, the way to actually move this has been really manual. So what I would actually do is I would use my translate tool, and I think this corner is probably the same as this one down here, so I would actually pick those points and make sure that I'm only moving this one, and then I would translate it over, and then I'd bring up my rotate menu and then use the point that I moved it to as my center of rotation. And then it's kind of a guessing game. Maybe I take tiny steps, move it 5 feet, maybe I can do more than that, maybe bump it up to 10, kind of click through. At this point, most of my view is actually obstructed by these toolbars, and I'm just kind of guessing. I don't want to over-rotate, and really it's just kind of it works, but there's a better way, and we've been able to kind of combine these into one tool that's a little bit easier to see, a little bit easier to use. So just threw it back out of the way. And let me show you what this new tool is. So you can see we've got elevational issues as well as the obvious horizontal XY issues. So what this tool is it's a freehand transform tool. So when I turn this on, you can see I get these changes to my center of rotation. And I get a few things going on here. I've got these circles around each axis, which allow me to actually rotate the data that's been selected. And then I've got these yellow squares, which when selected allow me to translate the data along those axes. So I'm going to show you what this process looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this translate, and I'm going to move it to where I think I am close on that corner. And then I'm going to use the hotkey C for moving my center of rotation. Then, by grabbing that rotate bar, I can move it. Now at this point, I never would have guessed 39 degrees. Maybe some of you are that good, but this way you're not just putting in numbers, clicking it, and seeing how far it moves. You can just line it up. Just wait till it looks good. All right, that looks relatively close. And you can see we've still, all I did was move everything along the X and Y axis, and then I rotated it. But we've still got a pretty large discrepancy in the elevation. That can easily be fixed by clicking along the actual Z-axis arrow itself, and now all I'm doing is translating the data vertically. So I can bring it down until it sits right on top of the rest of the data. Now at this point, if you really wanted to, you could come in here and we could actually say, oh, I think I can get it a little closer, or maybe I can do a little bit more here, a little bit less there. And if you want to, that's totally fine, but as many of you know, at this point, we know we're within the realm of what global registration can handle for us. So just go ahead and do a quick minimum separation filter on all this data. And then at this point, I would go ahead and just take the scans that I knew I had good quality GPS coordinates for, use those as my fixed data, and then allow this data to register right there. So we got it really close. We were able to just line it up by eye, and then boom, one click of the button with global registration, and everything is sitting in the right spot. So it's a little different, but I think it's a lot better. It's a lot easier to line things up along a rotation axis for sure, and it allows you to look at it real time rather than guessing at the distance and then hitting apply and seeing what happens. So at this time, I kind of want to jump into some of the digitizing tools, and really just one. So let me bring in some scan data that we've got here. So what I'm going to show you is, so the Smartline tool we've had for quite a long time. It's right here along the Create menu. It's also up here along the toolbar. As you can see right there, it's got those little stars next to it. And basically, a Smartline, just like creating a line, you're just digitizing a line along points as you click. But Smartline was actually really good at generating a line along a toe or a crest or the edge of a building. So anywhere along an object where there was a large angular change, it was really good at defining that edge for you. But we've done some changes to it to give it a little bit more capability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this Smart Select button, and that's going to apply my photo to my scan. I'm going to go ahead and model a scan triangulation out of this. So now I've got a scan triangulation of my Smartline scan, and you're going to notice something right away that looks a little bit different. Over here along the left-hand side, rather than that little the little coloring of the option being blue, it's red. And what that signifies is that there's actually a photo associated with that triangulation. So I'll bring this into view here. Just going to run a few quick items. Let's go ahead and despike this. And I'm going to go ahead and fill holes. So there's a few holes in there from some dust that was in the air. The Smart Connect and the scan triangulation work on the premise of connecting points in the order they were scanned. So if one of the points hit a piece of dust, that's going to be kind of missing from the line. So now we've got a nice valid triangulation. And you can see that we've got a really easy to define coal seam right down the middle, and I want to digitize the edge of that. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. So under the old premise of Smartline, where it's really great at defining edges when there's a change, when there's an actual structural change, this application wouldn't really work. The surface, it doesn't have a huge dip. There's not a cut into the wall between the coal and the rock. Really, there's no change besides the color. And that's the big difference that's been added to Smartline. It's now actually able to use the color differential between the facets, the adjacent facets, and digitize along that, as well as the actual change in direction. So I'll show you what I mean. The way it works, I just pick a point to start, and then I like to take kind of small steps as we move forward, and then it'll follow along what it believes to be the best fit. And in this case, it's actually using the color change from one section of the triangulation to another, and it's doing a really good job at actually digitizing the edge of that coal seam for me. So I can just go ahead and just take a few clicks along the edge, and if I get one where I don't think it quite interpreted what I wanted, just go ahead and hit the undo, and it just undoes that last portion. Gives you the option to come in and maybe get a little bit tighter so that it'll follow maybe a little bit more true to what you think it should. And this is a really powerful tool. Basically, what you're able to create here is this is going to go into your CAD folder. What you're able to create is a polyline or a polygon, whatever you choose, along a seam with a lot of detail with relatively few clicks. I maybe picked 10 or 15 points, and I've actually got hundreds or even thousands of nodes along this polyline. So the old way of doing things would have been quite manual, would have taken quite a bit of time. So this is a great new update that's just utilizing the photo that's already attached with the scan, using that to our benefit to help digitize along the difference in the geology. So let's go ahead and switch gears now. So one of the biggest uses for the scanner and the technology, really as a whole, is calculating volumes. So getting a volume of what's been moved, whether it be moved out of a pit, what's been added. And in this case, we're talking about stockpiles. So I've got a triangulation we're just going to pull up here, and there's 3 primary stockpiles that I'm interested in. This big one right here in the middle, and there's a little smaller one off to the left, and then one directly below it. So in this instance, I already have a triangulation, and it's fine. It's up to par with what I want. But I want to be able to query the volume for each individual pile. And depending on the technique, this can be really easy or it can be a little bit complicated. So I just want to show you some ways of combining some of these tools to maybe make it a little bit easier on you. So what I've done is I've gone to my Create Polygon tool, and I'm actually going to just really roughly digitize a polygon around the base of each one of these piles. So if you were in a situation where you've got a familiar footprint or your stockpile on your site doesn't change that much, you could probably just do this once and then use that same polygon every week or month or however often you're reporting on that moving forward. In this instance, I don't have one already created, so I'm just really quickly going to go ahead and create one around each one of these piles of interest. Get this last one finished up here. All right, so now I've actually got 3 loops. So these are actual polygons that are here in my CAD, my little CAD container off to the left, and they basically just go right around the toe of each of the pile. And on this top one, you can see one of the main issues. So you can see an area right here where my cursor is where the polygon looks to actually disappear. When you're clicking and you're creating a polygon, it's drawing a straight line, perfectly straight in between the first and second point that you click. So whether the triangulation itself actually raises or dips, the point, or the line is just cutting straight through that, which is not going to work for what I want to do next. So that can be easily fixed by highlighting those, and then we can project it to either an elevation if we wanted to. In this case, I want to project it to a surface. And I'm going to go ahead and use this stockpile surface that we're working with. And what that's going to do is it's not going to change the XY coordinate of the line itself. It's just going to move it elevationally so that it lays exactly on the surface. So I'll go ahead and zoom in here. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. So now that polyline actually follows the contour of the triangulation exactly, and there's no gaps in between it, nowhere where it undercuts it or shoots across the top. And that brings us to our next step. So this is a little counterintuitive to what you might be used to, but we're going to re-triangulate the triangulation that we already have. And I'm going to select this. So we've got our stockpile surface here, and then I'm going to go ahead and select these polygons as well. Except this time when I go to create the topographic triangulation, I'm going to split along edge constraints. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me multiple triangulations, and anywhere where it runs across an edge and it's going to interpret the polygon as an edge, it's going to create a separate object. So I'm going to go ahead and create that, and now we've got this piles container that should have 4 triangulations in it. I'll bring those into view, and at first glance it looks like 1, and it doesn't look any different. We've got a little bit of green coloring here due to the color that I used for my polygon. I'm going to use one of my favorite hotkeys, Control-2. I'll show you what that is for those of you that aren't familiar. Control-2 colors everything you have in your view randomly. And what I mean by that is each individual object is going to get assigned a solid color, and it's going to be different each time. So each object is going to have its own color. There we go. So this makes it just really easy to see the difference. I've now got 4 distinct triangulations. That's exactly where I want to be for generating some volumes out of these. So as you know, I need a good valid base before I can query the volume out of any of these. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these. And now since it split that triangulation along those edges, my base, or my initial topo here, has these holes that follow the footprint. So I can just use the fill holes option, and now I've got a nice valid base with stockpiles on top, and now I'm ready to move on and get my volumetrics out of these. Now at this point, this is where it would be really beneficial to actually name these. So I could go through, and we've got pile 1, pile 2, pile 3. So the reason I do that is because it's actually going to reference those in the report that it's going to spit out at the bottom, make it quite a bit easier to keep these in order. So I'm going to use my base there as my original surface, grab all 3 of these for my new surface, and then we're going to have our volume right down here at the bottom. And so I've got pile 1, volume above, volume below, pile 2, pile 3. So that's kind of a nice, quick, easy way rather than going through and individually triangulating each one of those. So I'm going to go on to another triangulation tool I want to talk to you guys about. Bring up a different one to work with here. So this is a triangulation of an area within an open pit that has some concern to it. So this wall right here, there's been indications that it's going to be moving, and there might be some rocks sloughing off. So we have a triangulation of an area of an intersection from another surface. I'll bring that in here. And the interest is to put this out in the field to see if this would work and allow enough room for trucks to drive by, but actually put up a safety berm here. So you can see I've got 2 triangulations. I've got the green one that intersects nice and cleanly right through my pit. And that's really easy to visualize, but without a line on that, I can't actually take this into the field and put some cones on it or spray it on the ground or whatever needs to be done for the guys in operation to check it out. But we've got this really cool tool. By just selecting the two of these, and this is under the query menu, I can actually just query these surface intersections. So now I've got a polyline, I've got a CAD object that I can kick out as a DXF, DWG, I've got a lot of options, and it's right along the edge, hide that, it's right along where those two triangulations were intersecting. So now it's not just something to look at, it's something I can actually use, and you can grab that, and like I said, you can really easily export it out as either a DXF, DWG. You can also do an RHD. You've got a lot of options. So at this point, it's really useful. You can take that out into the field, get it on the ground, and check the distance. So we've gone over a lot of different tools as far as creating data, getting some information out of it. And now I just want to real quickly touch on some of the options as far as reporting on those and communicating that information to other people. So for this, let's just go ahead and bring those stockpiles that we created back into the view. So this is a great example, and just to kind of show you a little bit more in detail about what these reporting options would look like, I'm just going to add a sign for something to add to it. So in this case, you could type in whatever the volume for that pile is, and you can. I like the three-sided. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here so we can see it. So you could type in whatever you wanted, the name of the pile, the material that's in there, the volume that it is, the date, and then if I rotate these around, I can actually orientate that sign so it's looking right at the camera. And that's really beneficial for this option right here. So right up here along the top, that little button that looks like a camera, that actually renders a high-resolution image. And what that does is basically we're just talking about taking a screenshot. But rather than taking a screenshot of everything in the view, it's just of what's in your actual view windows. You're not getting your Windows toolbar across the bottom. You're not getting everything along the side. It's just what's in the black. So you could really easily add that to a stockpile report. And if you're trying to, share something with somebody that isn't there and you want to give them like a little bit of a fly-through, we've got this option where you can create keyframes, and you can tell it how long you want it to take between each one, and then it'll actually create a video for you, and that gets published as an AVI. I strongly recommend you guys play with that on your own. It doesn't play too well with the webinar, but it's really powerful. It's a great way to share information and kind of get a good visual out of it. And one of my favorites that I'm going to share with you guys is this one right here. So you can see that small little objects has that Adobe symbol to it. This actually creates a 3D PDF. And what I mean by that is it's an interactive PDF with everything you have in the view. So it's going to have all your triangulations, your signs, everything like that. And you can really easily just attach that to an email. Somebody can open it, spin it around, and you can share that with. And that's great for sharing information with people that aren't in the office. So if you've got a remote office, corporate office, people that are off-site, it's a great way to not just give them a volume report and say this pile had this much in it. They can actually see what that looks like, which can help them in a lot of ways. They can get a nice visual for the pile to see if one area has been really dug out by the loader or you've really added to another spot. So quite a few options as far as sharing this information once it's been created. So that's the tail end of what I wanted to show you guys today. I hope it helps. I really appreciate everybody taking the time to join us. And I'm going to take it back over to Cherie now. I think we're ready for some questions.
Great. Thank you, Clayton. As I mentioned before, please write in any questions that you may have on the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. It looks like we do have a few already. First one here. Do I need special software to show the 3D PDF in the movie?
That's a great question. So the movie is generated as an AVI, and that'll play with just regular Windows Media Player. I've never had a problem, and I've never known anyone to need anything other than that to run it. And the 3D PDF, you don't. You don't need anything special. You don't need Adobe Pro or anything like that. The regular free version that came installed on my machine, I think it comes with Windows 7, you're good to go. So they can open it and interact with it. You don't need to have any special version of Adobe to look at that.
Okay. Which version of iSight Studio are you using in this demonstration?
So I'm using iSight Studio 4.2. This is our latest release. We released 4.2 in July, so a lot of these tools are very, very new. And we should, everyone, if you're up to date on your maintenance, you should be able to have access to that right away. So if you saw anything here you don't have, please feel free to contact us and we can help you get up to date on that latest version.
Great. Does the dust and snow filter work similarly for fog?
It does. It really depends on the density of the fog, but the principle is the same. It's just that in one form or another, there's enough moisture in the air that it actually created reflectivity that mimicked an actual solid object. So I've seen it work really well on not just fog, but also steam from plants that are working and things like that, as well as smoke. So depending on how thick it is, there still may need to be a little bit more manual cropping involved, but it can do the real heavy lifting for you. So yes, it will.
Okay. If you use the Smartline instead of the Polyline to cut out your piles, do you need to do the project to surface step?
I'm not sure I quite understand what you're saying. I think I do. If you were to use the Smartline to create your polygons and allow it to trace around the edge for you, nothing would change. You do everything exactly the way I did it. The only thing you want to make sure is that this little symbol right here that you see over here on the left next to my loops, you see how it's a closed square? That means that it's an actual closed polygon. So you want to make sure it's not just an open line. Now if you did that, and it did have an open line, I'll just kind of use this real quick. If I were to use the Smartline, trace around the edge of this, let's see here. So if I did that, and it wasn't closed, you see how it's just a line there? There's this option under the Edit menu. So you hit Edit Close, and then now I've got a valid polygon that I can project to my surface. So you can use either tool to create them. You just want to make sure that it is closed and that it actually wraps all the way back around.
Thank you for the quick review of the new iSight, Clayton. Can you show us the new features of the Geotech tool?
So we have had a lot of changes to the Geotech menu. I did not prepare any data for that right now, but I'll bring my email up here at the once we're done answering everyone else's questions, and I'd be more than happy to set up a one-on-one GoToAssist conference, and I can kind of go through all of the changes that we've done to that because we have added quite a bit of functionality.
Do we get a copy of this presentation for our records to review again? And I can actually answer that question for you. We will have this webinar online for you in about 5 to 7 days. We'll have it available for you to view on our website. So you're welcome to go there and see this along with all of the other webinars that we've recorded thus far. Next question, what is the easiest way to filter trees and shrubs?
So trees and shrubs cause a pretty big problem, especially if the area hasn't been cleared. And we're working on some vegetation tools that I've been helping test in Studio 5.0, which is going to be coming out next year. But in the meantime, the best tool to utilize is probably our topography filter. And what the topography filter does is basically it utilizes the same principle as a minimum separation, where you're keeping a point every so far, so in this instance 2 feet, but topography actually gives you the option to apply another level to that. So I can actually keep the lowest point. So with trees and shrubbery, Generally, you've got some points on the bare ground beneath that, and rather than going through and cropping all the way, you can just select the area with a large amount of vegetation, apply a high or a low topography filter based on what your needs are for the triangulation, and it will get rid of all the points within that cell size that are higher than the lowest. Yeah, it'll keep the absolute lowest one. So that can really help out with tree cover.